is United States growth as a world power. There's no doubt that the United States is the preeminent world power today. I don't want my wife to cut it though. She cut our Yorkie's hair and it didn't go well. Anyway, sorry. So the United States is a world power, probably along with China and Russia, but we're more powerful than both of them. There was a time where we were very equal to Russia, and there was a time where the United States was not a world power at all. So let's trace a little bit of the United States' rise to becoming a world power. You could take some light notes on this. It's going to be a weird unit in that there's going to be lots and lots of things to primary source evaluate. So, all right, let's take a look. Let's begin with the Industrial Revolution. And I know that seems weird. How can the United States become a world power by an industrial revolution? Well, industrial revolution is what gave the United States the money and the industrial might to become a world power. As we modernize and our production efforts become more technologically sound, we're able to build a stronger military. And that really begins with Teddy Roosevelt and the White Fleet. Teddy modernized our Navy, created this new modern military made up of very powerful ships, very much more technologically sound and just better than ships we had prior to this. The United States was kind of doing this quietly, becoming this world power, and we were beginning to kind of itch to show our power as a country as we get close to 1900. And into this come the Spanish. Let's take a look at the Spanish Empire. And at one point, it was one of the largest in the world. If we click on a map here, we can see that the Spanish were very clearly one of the most powerful nations in the world at one point. Okay, so we have the Spanish controlling most of South America, most of the Caribbean, Florida, Mexico, all of Central America, and a good part of the West, especially the Southwest, and the Central Territory of the United States. But as 1900 approached, the Spanish were falling apart. They didn't have the money. Their colonies weren't yielding the precious metals that they had previously. And so the Spanish hit a point where they were just holding on. They had a few territories left, and two of those territories were incredibly interesting to the United States. The first would be the Philippines. The Philippines is an island nation. Let's take a look here on the map. The reason that the United States was so interested in the Philippines was that the Philippines are very strategically located. As we move around and scroll out a little bit, we see that the Philippines are close to China, Japan, Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, not that far from India. The United States had very little presence and no real military bases in the Pacific. And we wanted to change that. And so not only did we want the Philippines, we were hoping to get this little tiny island out here called Guam, which, by the way, we still control today. And we were hoping to put military bases on both. We still have a military presence on Guam. We no longer control the Philippines. We're able to boot the Spanish out. And we're able to do that because the Spanish weren't what they used to be, and the United States wasn't what it used to be. We were much more powerful, much stronger. And Teddy Roosevelt and President McKinley pushed us um, into a war with the Spanish called the Spanish-American War that happened in 1898. We defeated the Spanish in Manila Harbor and booted them out. The Philippines thought that we were there to be their kind of savior. They were hoping to gain freedom and autonomy, but the United States kept that country as a colony, which, by the way, led to something called the Philippine-American War, a guerrilla war that lasted for quite a while. But it did give the United States a military base, both in the Philippines and Guam. The United States went on to invade Cuba, and we booted the Spanish out. Let's take a quick look here. Now, when you look at Cuba, there are several interesting things about Cuba. One of them is that it's only 90 miles from the tip of the United States, and so having the Spanish there is not something we were really interested in. So we go in, we boot the Spanish out, which is wonderful for us, but we pledge never to keep Cuba as a colony. Instead, we signed two amendments, the Platt Amendment and the Teller Amendment. The amendments make it so that the United States vows never to take Cuba as a colony, and they also create something called the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, which is kind of a weird situation today, as this country is a stated communist enemy of ours, and yet on their territory we have a large marine and naval base in Guantanamo Bay. It'd be very similar to the Chinese having a military base in San Francisco Harbor. Thank goodness they don't. But it's the first step on our kind of road to becoming this world power. So what's the next step? The next step would be Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy decides that he is not interested in European powers taking part in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere is North America, Central America, South America, the Caribbean. And so he goes back to a statement by President Monroe, an old statement called the Monroe Doctrine, that basically says the United States controls everything that happens in their hemisphere, and Europe should not get involved. The deal with that, though, is that when he said it, the United States was a baby nation with a baby military and a baby world presence, and so Europe laughed. Teddy Roosevelt is restating this corollary, or restating, sorry, this doctrine with a corollary. The corollary is an addition. His addition says that all Central and South American countries that owe Europe money must pay their debts to Europe, so that Europe has no business in the Americas. He accomplishes this by loaning the money to pay off Europe and pushing Europe out of any influence in the Western Hemisphere. Germany tried to stand up to this, and Roosevelt threatened to go to war with Germany. A lot of people don't know how close we came to war with Germany in the early 1900s, but the Germans eventually backed down. So this puts us on this road. So what comes next? Well, what comes next is World War I. The United States was a very reluctant participant in World War I. We came late to the war. We did not really want to be involved in the war. We got drawn in by submarine warfare, something called the Zimmerman Note, where the Germans tried to get Mexico to invade the United States. And while the United States maybe didn't spend a lot of time in the war, our presence was decisive. And it begins to really turn the world's head as to what U.S. military might can do. World War I maybe opens people's eyes to this, but World War II will complete it. The United States, once again a reluctant participant in World War II, proves to be the decisive nation. The nation with the industrial might, the population, the natural resources, the industrial capacity to fight a war on a major scale, a scale the rest of the world really can't. Um, just a quick aside, it's a little scary that our industrial capacity has been somewhat eroded today, that we rely a lot on other countries for our industrial capacity. And if we really did get into a prolonged world war, which I really think is unlikely, but if we did, I think that we would be strained. Now, that being said, the United States has always been amazingly good at ramping up production, at going from 0 to 100 when it comes to making warfare with pretty good pace and quality and results. So, World War II really sealed the deal. It made the United States a world power. And if we look at the things that were manufactured by the United States during the war, it's just really amazing how powerful and how good our industrial might is. Well, that took us to a weird place. The war was a tough war. It's not that the United States can just run over anyone it wants to, and we look at famous images from the war here. We see that, the United States didn't always have an easy time of it, but we did pretty good. And what we really did was we showed the power that we had. Maybe the thing that seals it, though, is what happens at the end of the war when we develop nuclear weapons. And we use the Trinity test out in the New Mexican desert to prove that we can definitely use nuclear weapons, or that we definitely have invented nuclear weapons. But the attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki would really show the world just how devastating United States military power could be, and just how much we had gone from a nation that was very militarily substandard to the most powerful nation in the world, or at least a nation that was tied with our Russian counterparts, who would soon after the war invent their own nuclear weapon. The United States road was relatively quick compared to other countries of the world. We got there, relatively rapidly, from a country that was, really founded in the 1790s to roughly 150 years later, in the 1940s, being cemented as the preeminent world power. It changes the United States' place in the world, our dynamic, our relations with others, and it still is very much with us today. Don't think that the coronavirus pandemic that we're dealing with today isn't influenced and isn't affected by our status as a powerful, wealthy nation in the world. And so this United States transformation is important. We're going to talk some more about specific events from this. So it'll be interesting when we get to your document reviews, because there's going to be so many different things that you could talk about. You could pick any one of these instances or things that we're dealing with to focus on, so that that'll make it a little more wide open. Maybe a good thing, maybe not. We shall see. All right. Happy Tuesday to everybody. I will have some more stuff on tomorrow. There's going to be a little PowerPoint. There's going to be a couple of short documentary clips that I want you to watch. And we'll go from there. Hope everyone's safe and healthy. And we will, I hope to see you before the end of the year. I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope we get together in my classroom.